Do you ever question if your emotions are genuine or just a product of your upbringing? Many people say that we should just listen to our feelings, but is it really the best course of action? We explore in depth the nuanced distinctions between true intuition and emotions muddled by fear and misunderstanding. Stay with us as we delve into a true story that tests the veracity of our emotions and shows how being in the here and now may result in a more profound comprehension of reality. Are our emotions reliable? Is our bodily perception of reality reliable? Can you share anything about intuition, which is different yet equally intriguing to me? Now is the time to trust our gut. Many individuals will tell you to trust your feelings. Having said that, I do not necessarily believe that to be true. Recognize how you feel, absolutely. Yes, be present as an impartial observer of your emotions. Pay attention to your emotions and acknowledge their existence. Depending on where these doubts originate in you, trusting them, that is, taking them at face value as the truth, either for yourself or as a guide to right or skilled action, may be difficult. Anecdotally, I stayed in a cottage for 3 years while I was living in the countryside of England, namely in the alternative town of Glastonbury. I used to give workshops in London and other locations once a month in my cherished Russian-made Lada automobile. Over the weekends, we would hold workshops with titles like Transcending Time and Be Here Now. With the exception of having an average of around 10 people, not much has changed. A room upstairs in my cottage had to be rented out as my income was insufficient. I had a handful of folks during those 3 years. It was my assumption that there was a second room that I could hire out on occasion as well. The room eventually became empty, so I put an ad in the paper. I selected a young woman who had recently received a job offer in that town from among other applicants. After spending the first night in her own room, she made her way downstairs to the shared kitchen for breakfast. Her words were, "I can't stay here." And I said, "What's wrong?" In response, she stated, "It's just a feeling, and I've always listened to my feelings. Something is wrong, and I simply cannot remain." My response to her anxiety was, "Okay, that's fine." Because she was expecting a more traditional response, like, "I've interviewed all these people and now you're doing this to me?" She found that extremely unsettling. The rent you paid in advance will not be refunded to you. I did, however, promise to refund your payment. That's all right. That further perplexed her. My response was, "Oh, you could spend 1 more night, or 2 more nights." She stayed for the second night before deciding to stay the next morning. A new emotion has washed over me. My response was, "Oh, that's fine, that's good." "I just placed another ad in the paper and now you're informing me this?" Would have been the typical response, which made her feel a bit uneasy once again. Doing so is a typical ego reaction, and it will only serve to complicate your life and the lives of those around you. Life gets easy whenever that person doesn't react that way. Yet as things get easy, those who anticipate typical reactions are perplexed. She stayed since this was a strange individual. We became closer after a few weeks, and she told me that the first time we were alone in her room, she proclaimed, "I found you so weird that I thought you might creep in the middle of the night and murder me." She said, "Living in the same house with you is like living in a float tank." I don't think she gained nearly as much from my explanations as she did from simply being present. While it's okay that she had her share of neurotic reactivity moments, it's important to note that she did. So, emotions. From where did she derive the first sentiments that she felt, which she subsequently took to be the right way to proceed? Naturally, they weren't. They sprang from the all-too-commonplace dread and misunderstanding of reality. People and situations can be misunderstood by the mind. Because you perceive things through the lenses of your mind's conditioning, ideas, and early experiences, you are prone to misinterpretation. Because of your conditioning, you may have even seen it in horror films involving strange, silent characters who suddenly appear while you're in the shower. Consequently, pinpointing the source of this emotion is not a simple task. Does it originate from some more primal, instinctual level? Being fully present is the source of intuition. Your mind's programming is the source of your intuition. Typically, negative emotions like wrath or fear do not corrupt intuition. You may be sure of it. Your feelings are supported by a subtle but powerful force. Your feeling is not based on nervous energy. You have an innate sense that this is the correct thing to do. Neither you nor anybody else may understand why. A calmer, more distinct vibe comes out of it. In order to return to the events involving this young woman, let's pretend for a second that I was a psycho who couldn't be trusted not to murder her. In theory, it could work. Thus, I am unsure of the response to it. As for me, I've learned from experience that when the correct thing to do becomes crystal clear, I can always find contentment in that decision. It doesn't matter whether there's a maniac, you still know it's not a good fit. There's an energetic imbalance, and I don't know how to put my finger on it. To understand the difference between an intuition, a more profound sensation that emerges from being in the now, and an idea that develops as a result of mental conditioning, you must have direct personal experience with both. People generate a lot of trouble in their lives, relationships, and relationships with others when they misunderstand reality due to seeing it through the filter of their indoctrination. By reacting emotionally, which is a defense mechanism for the ego's perpetually weak sense of self-identity, people not only misunderstand but also burden circumstances with extraneous baggage. Returning to the original point, what would have transpired if my typical reaction had been to get furious and accusatory upon hearing that she couldn't stay after just one night? My distinct identity would have been fortified by that, which would have originated in my ego. My attention could have been focused on the fact that I had just spent money on an ad in the local paper if the reaction had been when she ultimately opted to remain shortly after the second night. It wasn't expensive, but the ego would have hung on to it and thought, no, I've already spent that, and all those people I told couldn't come now have finally found lodging. The ego takes great pleasure in causing other people to feel bad about themselves, so I would have done it again. Ego could go so far as to say, you're absolutely right. The person shouldn't just up and disappear like that. However, you only state, this is what is, rather than stating, look at how people should behave. You have the choice to embrace it or reject it. On a more pragmatic note, I could have responded to her statement, I've decided to stay, on the second night by saying, oh, it's too late. I've already found somebody else, or by suggesting, no, maybe it's better if you do go, because tomorrow night you might again not want to stay. These things could have happened, but in this case, as in many others, the situation stayed straightforward because to inaction. The ego creates a story whenever an individual's failure to comply with expectations causes things to go wrong. Telling other people about it makes it stronger, so you know it's happening. You know, I had this girl. I rejected 5 other people for her, and now look what she's done to me, I could have said, picking up the phone and told the story. That's ego boosting, and the listener will probably exclaim, oh my God, that's terrible. Then, naturally, you might begin to wonder things like, maybe she's totally neurotic, maybe she's a psycho, and begin to fabricate stories based on actual events. If you remove superfluous responsiveness, things can really be that simple. But you have to be present and not identified with a person to do it. People are easily hurt. Offenses might sting more when you feel connected to a person. There are a lot of individuals out there who are really hurt by things, and they can give you perfectly good reasons to believe it. Just look on the internet. An offense is a delight for the ego. Not because I don't think some comments are insulting, I just think it's a minor point. Again, what might she have said that could have been really insulting if it is anything really offensive? Saying, you're too ugly for me to stay with you, would have been an option. It would be insulting to the ego. Another possibility is that she spoke the words, well, I've realized I cannot stay with a white male. You must exercise extreme caution when interacting with other individuals. Can you tell me the question? Does my presence in the encounter serve no purpose other than to bolster my imaginary self-esteem and provide an excuse for me to wrong someone? That's a major ego boost since it allows me to feel like a victim if I wrong someone. I can't help but feel like the victim every time. The ego takes great pleasure in that since it serves to bolster itself. Whenever I err, I may explain, "You know what he said and what he did? Let me tell you about this." Oh my goodness, how on earth could someone pull off that? This implies subconsciously that I am better than the other. Ego loves to make other people look bad, which is why recounting someone else's words or actions is a common way to satisfy this need. There are certainly those people in your life who, whenever they speak, make sure that everyone else is incorrect but themselves. This is especially true when you are correct. Why am I always correct? It's bizarre. That is a question they never bring up. However, that remains an enigma of the human condition. For some reason, no matter what, I seem to be correct every time, and everyone else is completely mistaken. This has not been sufficiently investigated by philosophers. This mystery remains unsolved. Even though we're talking to a very self-aware bunch here, some of you might notice that whenever there was a disagreement or dispute in the past few years, it seemed like everyone else was always in the wrong. So, take a look back at your life over the past year or 2 or 3. It's easy to dismiss another person's viewpoint as completely incorrect if it disagrees with your own. An entire nation, religion, or group might likewise be brought into disrepute. Feelings of moral superiority are powerful. Does it follow that there can't be some who are completely mistaken? Naturally, there can be those who intend to trick you. You can be greeted with friendliness and kindness when you go to purchase a used car, but the salesperson sells you a product that malfunctions the very next day, obviously deceiving you. So, what's your next move? Even then, you should resist the want to exaggerate the situation by constructing a web of stories in your head about what a terrible person that is, and jumping to conclusions. After there, you take the story one step further by telling it to yourself and others. Go ahead and tell the vendor how you actually feel about them, instead of asking a simple question like, "What can I do to fix this?" Going to court doesn't mean you have to lose your composure. I am not implying that you should do nothing and tolerate everyone or everything. No, that's not the meaning. It is possible to remain objective and focused on the facts of the case even when taking a plainly wronged scenario to court. This way, you won't have to add the layer of, "You are the evil one, you are wrong." In A New Earth, I presented the account of a Zen teacher who was accused of fathering a child and his comments at each stage. Is that so? I won't repeat them here, but I think you all recall. You may recall that the parents presented their daughter to him after accusing him of being the child's father. He kept asking, "Is that so?" whenever they informed him anything new. He was informed, "You're the father, now look after the baby, we don't want it." He didn't take part in creating the tale, but he nonetheless lost respect as a result of internet comments criticizing him. "Is that so?" he asked calmly, without defending himself. In due time, everything became clear. After their daughter came clean about her father's infidelity, the parents returned, expressed their regret, and begged for custody of the child. "We now know you're not the father. Please forgive us. We did a terrible thing by accusing you," he said. "Is that so?" at his reply. The fact that this story may or may not have occurred is irrelevant. A severe case of not participating in story-making that bolsters the ego is shown below. In many aspects of your life, you can put that into practice. Do not criticize another person or bring up their shortcomings, failures, or lies, or express your disapproval of their opinions or actions. Doing so will eliminate most, if not all, conflicts from your life. To calmly and clearly navigate life's unknowns, one must learn to distinguish between conditioned emotions and genuine insight. We may simplify even the most complex situations by letting go of unneeded responses and staying present, even though it's not always easy. To continue in your growth of being awake and more present, make sure to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like as we explore more pathways to clarity and awareness together.